One constant that you hear when it comes to doubt around the Chicago Bulls is the front office, whether it's between their inability to sign and be aggressive in the trade market, or if it's their inability to kind of strike where the players have the best value. One thing that continues to be clear is the doubt around the Bulls front office. That was solidified by the annual NBA GM survey. We're going to talk a little bit about that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. I'm the host there, Haize, host and creator of Chicago Bulls Central, Chicago Bears Central, Chicago Cubs Central, Chicago Sky Central. I host a lot of Chicago sports shows and podcasts, and we are glad to have you here tuned in with Locked On Bulls. Thank you for making Locked On Bulls your first listen every single day. Holding it down without Pat, the designer today, who will be back for one last episode before his final farewell from the Locked On Podcast Network, but we'll talk about that at a different date. Today, we're here to talk about our Bulls, and the first topic that I want to jump into today is the annual GM surveys, the GMs and coaches around the NBA. The ESPN does this every single year, and one of the things that stood out about this survey when it came to things that pertain to the Chicago Bulls were really just the Chicago Bulls front office. And that is something that I want to talk about. We may do a deeper dive into the survey itself and specific Bulls things and Modest Bucilis and the doubt around his ability to win Rookie of the Year, but they feel pretty favorable of his chances to be one of the best rookies to come out of this draft. We'll talk about that, right? We'll break that down a little bit deeper, but I want to talk about the front office, right? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that I think that it says a lot, and I think it resonates throughout the Chicago Bulls fan base as well, is that it's a really difficult thing to have faith in the direction of your franchise when the people directing that franchise are the ones that you have the most doubt about. Now, you guys know I'm not somebody who is completely against every move that AK and Eversley have made. Some worked out, some did not. I think that, they're batting a worse batting average than I would like them to bat at this point in time with leading the Chicago Bulls. But the severity around the doubt around them is legitimate, right? And so, this was a Bulls team that, they were initially aggressive. They came into this, they wanted to evaluate the young pieces. They spent the first half of the season, really first 2/3 of that first season, evaluating this team. They came up with what they came up with. They decided to move a lot of the younger pieces, bring in an all-star at that time in Nikola Vucevic, and thus it sent the Chicago Bulls down a path of trying to build this contender now. That following offseason, they bring in Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball. They give up some first-round picks. Between building this team, they gave up 3 first-round picks, right? 2 of those that went to the Orlando Magic. One that is still pending to go to the San Antonio Spurs. It's top 10 protected, I think, both this year and next year. And then it has a protection on it as well the third year. After that, I think it converts to 2 second-round picks. But they gave up a lot to build this version of the team. That team then, for a small period of time, was the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference, albeit a weak East. They didn't beat some of the better teams in the Eastern Conference that year. I still don't think they were a contender. Even Nikola Vucevic, in his recent interview where he was really open, he says that he admitted it probably wasn't sustainable for them to stay at number 1, but he legitimately thought that team could have finished anywhere between 4 and 6. And I believe that as well. I think that team could have definitely finished in that area when it was all said and done had they stayed fully healthy. And then that, even after the initial building of that team, which brought a lot of excitement, the subsequent off seasons and trade periods after that was really kind of kicking the can down the road. And you could tell that this was a front office that was hopeful initially that Lonzo Ball was going to make a quicker return than he did. It ended up not happening. Ayo Dosunmu takes over the starting point guard role, then Pat Bev. Then we get Kobe White to take over the starting role at that point in time. He had the season that he had last year. But it all kind of ended up in just the Bulls having a worse record every year after that, right? You then eventually move on from Andre Drummond, Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, Javonte Green, even though Javonte was a free agent. He had some injury concerns, things like that. And you end up netting back in that no first-round picks, right? A couple of second-round picks in that, and Josh Giddey. That's basically what you got from moving on from assets that were valuable. And, so the Bulls front office is carrying around that stigma of, had they just moved quicker, had they made a decision to move on from this core quicker, they could have been in a place where they have way more assets than what they have now. And so that naturally leads to a place of doubt with this front office. And that's just where the team sits right now. There's tons of doubt around their ability to truly get this rebuild right. On top of that, even between those decisions, they then draft Patrick Williams was their first initial draft pick, who's been disappointing by many Bulls fans. You get Ayo Dosunmu, who I think, he's the antithesis of that. He was a second-round pick that's really excelled above what you expect of normal second-round picks. Marko Simonovic was a draft pick bias as well. He's out of the league. Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, they haven't really played a whole lot. Julian Phillips, 40 games in his initial rookie season. Dalen Terry was the least played player at his pick position, played a little bit more last season. And then now we have drafted Miles Vucevic, a player that was projected to go in top 5, ends up falling to 11 to the Chicago Bulls, but we don't know how that's going to turn out yet. So when you pair with this a team a front office that spent a lot to build a team together, that team didn't work. You break up that team. You don't get a lot back for it. You haven't necessarily drafted in a way to where it makes the fan base or the basketball world confident in your ability to find talent in the draft yet. Maybe Miles Vucevic, Julian Phillips excels. Maybe that starts changing and turning the tides there. And so when you have doubt around your front office, like I said at the start of this, it puts you in a position where it's extremely hard to have faith in a rebuild. And that's what this front office is hoping for, right? You've rebuilt your roster. You've gone younger. You haven't completely blown it up. Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic still on this roster. You haven't been able to move those guys. The Bulls are hesitant and don't want to, understandably, have to attach another asset to move off of Zach LaVine, considering what they had to give up to build this team and the lack of those draft assets that they got back in breaking it up. So when you hear things like the NBA world and the GMs in that survey are still shocked that the Bulls didn't get a first-round pick back in the Alex Caruso trade, welcome to the world. We all feel that way with you. The situation that the Bulls are in right now, I think that the biggest doubt right now is the front office. And when that's your biggest doubt, right? Yeah, you have doubts on your roster. Every team, some of the best rosters in the NBA still have doubts on the roster, the things that don't necessarily fit the best, or holes on the roster, so to say. So, that's to be expected to an extent. And I think that extent grows the further you're away from being a true contender. You have more doubt around your roster. That's why you aren't a contender, because you have doubts on things that don't fit or that you're missing on your roster. So I think that a thing that this season that would go a long way into kind of changing the tide of how Bulls fans and the confidence level in AK and Eversley leading this team comes down to a couple of things. What do you do with the Zach LaVine trade? Do you eventually move on from Zach? What do you get back in that Zach LaVine trade? That's going to go a long way in kind of changing how fans feel about the Chicago Bulls. Second, how this Josh Giddey trade works out. If Josh Giddey comes here and he's everything that you hope or think that he can be, with having a larger role and the ball in his hands more, and that proves some doubters wrong, the people that right now look at this and say, hey, this Josh Giddey trade was just a terrible trade. If Giddey comes in, he pairs well next to Kobe White, Kobe, Ayo, LaVine, if they kind of pair well together while LaVine's here, that can go a long way in kind of changing that mindset. Miles Vucevic end up working out. Now, that may not be something we know right away. We may not know that for another 2 seasons or something like that. But if Vucevic ends up working out, that can go a long way in changing it. Dalen, Julian, these guys start showing something. But overall, I think that the Bulls have to start having success in all areas. The wins right now aren't going to come. I know some Bulls fans hold out hope that this team is going to be much better than expected. I'm somebody who would think this team is going to win between 30 and 34, 35-ish games, right? So the wins, I'm not really worried about the wins right now, but the development. Do you start showing meaningful development from this Bulls team? I do think this is a team that is going to probably be in a lot of games, but may just struggle to finish them. And if that's the case, that's kind of promising, because you can learn to win, right? So is that the place where this Bulls team is, even if they do go through a season of struggling and not necessarily getting a lot of wins? And how those individual pieces round out. And I do think as well, another big thing that may be upcoming for this front office, not immediately, but in the future, is what happens with Billy Donovan. When and if you move on from Billy Donovan, who's that next coach that you get in here? Where's the state of the team at that point in time? I think these are all things that could play into that. One of the biggest doubts of the Bulls being that front office starting to turn that tide. And we've seen front offices that have had a rough go to start and then things start working out eventually down the road and they start making better decisions. The biggest question to me that we hopefully we start getting some answers to, maybe not the ultimate answer, is that has this front office learned from the mistakes that it's made in the past? And if it does, that's something that could start helping have a little bit more faith in this new direction that the Chicago Bulls are going on. But please feel free to let us know how you guys feel about that, whether it's a comment on the YouTube section or you call in on the voicemail line, which is also in the description. But next up, we're going to be talking about P. Will being ranked by Hoops Hype as the 23rd best power forward in the game of basketball. We're going to talk about that. But first, we got to get to a message from one of our sponsors, and that is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. The eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, Bulls fans, thank you for making Locked On Bulls your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from the national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. All right, everydayers, let's go ahead and get into this one, man. Patrick Williams ranked as number 23 on Hoops Hype's list of the top power forwards in the league. Now, this may come as a surprise to some Bulls fans. Patrick Williams is still a very polarizing player, and I think he's going to maintain being a very polarizing player as long as he's here on the Chicago Bulls and kind of not performing at the level where it eliminates a lot of questions around P. Will, right? Like, P. Will is a player that still, contrary to what some people would say, he's not a bust yet. And I think Patrick Williams has shown enough to say that he won't be a bust. Like, to me, I look at a bust as a player that can't contribute at the NBA level and can't be a starter. Patrick Williams has shown, especially on some teams, depending on how teams work out, the way that Patrick Williams is right now as a defender, being able to hit open threes, he can be a starter on a lot of NBA rosters. And he's the type of player that I think a lot of teams would want on their team. There's always going to be a spot for somebody like Patrick Williams. But the problem is that Patrick Williams has not lived up to the expectations. And regardless of whether the expectations are not, Patrick Williams has still not played at a level consistently enough to where you look at Patrick Williams and you just say adamantly, this guy has to be on this team, right? And while I like I said, I do believe that there are a lot of teams that Patrick Williams can start on. But not every starter that's on every NBA roster is a starter that you look at and you just say, hey, if we remove this guy, or we can't upgrade from this guy. And that's where the problem of Patrick Williams lies in with a lot of Bulls fans and how they view P. Will, is the fact that as a 4th overall pick, even though that's not necessarily on him, he didn't pick himself number 4 overall, is that he is not excelled at the rate that you would hope that a player with his draft selection would play at. And I think he's adequately listed around here when it comes to Patrick Williams, when you look at this list by Hoops Hype. So to round out, let's talk about the players around Patrick Williams, and then we'll talk about the top 5 players, and then we'll get back into what Patrick Williams needs to do to solidify himself going into next season for the Chicago Bulls. So we'll start off with Patrick Williams being at number 23. We're going to start off at number 20, right? Let's go a little bit higher than that. I think I'm undercutting a little bit. Let's go up to number 15. Let's do that. So at 15, they have Jabari Smith with the Houston Rockets. At number 16, they have Tobias Harris. I'll leave that at that. They have PJ Washington at number 17, Draymond Green at number 18, John Collins at number 19, Obi Toppin at number 20, Cam Johnson at number 21, G.G. Jackson, a second-year player. Keep in mind, a second-year player that was drafted in the second round, that in his rookie year, 14 points per game, 4 rebounds, 1.2 assists, right under a steal per game, a half a block per game as well, and 42% shooting and 35% shooting from three. Now, he did benefit from the fact that that Memphis Grizzlies team had tons of injuries all up and down the roster, so he got more opportunity. But he's at one spot ahead of Patrick Williams. You then have Patrick Williams at number 23, Rui Hachimura at number 24, Jonathan Isaac at number 25, Santi Aldama also with the Memphis Grizzlies at number 26, Jeremy Sohan at number 27, Isaiah Stewart at number 28, Kyle Anderson 29, and Maxi Kleber at 30. So I think that where you have Patrick Williams right now, it's fair. When you look at it, some people would probably say maybe a player like Rui Hachimura should maybe be above a Patrick Williams. Maybe he's shown a little bit more. And also Jonathan Isaac, he's turned into one of the better on-ball defenders in the NBA, even after his injury, which is great to see. But some people may try to make that case for Patrick Williams being below those guys. But when it comes to Patrick Williams and what we need to see from him, the thing I always go back to, and I'm going to keep going back to this because I do think that this was the best month, the full month of Patrick Williams' career, the best month that we've seen when you look at it. 16 games played in the month of December in 2024, 14 points per game, 52% shooting from the field, 50% shooting from three. And the reason why I highlight that, 52% shooting, but he still only took 10 shots per game. Only 10. He was just way more efficient. 4 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game, 0.9 blocks and 0.9 steals. So basically rounded up, 1 steal, 1 block per game. If Patrick Williams is able to make the month of December a full season for himself, to me, that's a huge step for Patrick Williams. If he can average 14 points, let's get closer to 5 rebounds per game, 2 assists and a block and a steal per game. If Patrick Williams can do that for a full season, that to me shows that with the defense that he plays and being more consistent at that, that's the type of season where you start then looking at Patrick Williams and saying, nah, he's a starter. We may need more scoring, but he's definitely our starter going forward, right? And it's up to Pat to show that. And the thing that we keep coming back to Pat, at least for me, I know a lot of people have other things that they worry about with Pat, like even his ball handling has been something that I think has been fine positionally, but he's been working with dribble too much this offseason. It still comes down to confidence for Patrick Williams. When you look at that month of December as well, he had 3 games of scoring over 20 points per that. In that 12 out of those 16 games, he scored in double digits, right? So Patrick Williams, it wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was intentional. That was also the month where DeMar missed time. Zach LaVine was out. The ball was moving around more freely for the Chicago Bulls. All those things were playing into that. And Patrick Williams benefited from that, delivering, again, what I think is the best month of his NBA career. The best consistent month of his NBA career, I feel like he delivered there. Now, we got to see it more consistently. And so it's really up to Patrick Williams to deliver that. And can he do it? Let's hope so, right? Because a Patrick Williams that is on, if you can eliminate the question on if Patrick Williams is part of your future, I get it. He's gotten a contract extension. That doesn't necessarily mean he's stuck around. That's the Bulls maintaining their investment. And if they need to trade Pat, other teams are going to get a lot of years. You maybe get something more back there, but it's really up to Patrick Williams to show it. And so I do think that the Bulls are going to play a style that's kind of more fitting of trying to get more out of Patrick Williams, playing at a quicker pace. The Bulls were 28th in pace last year. When that month of December where the Bulls played with the pace, if they would have played with the same pace in December, if they would have played the full season with the pace that they played in the month of December, if English doesn't escape me, if they're able to do that, they would have been right around middle of the pack, 15th, 16th in pace last season. Still not great, but a drastic improvement over being 28th. So playing with the quicker pace, generating more opportunities offensively. Also, Patrick Williams playing more aggressively. That month of December, we saw Patrick Williams attack closeouts. We saw Patrick Williams crash the boards. We saw Patrick Williams go after putbacks. Again, so a big portion of it, play style, and then also mentality. And that's the part that we have no ability to answer on what Patrick Williams' mentality is going to be for a full season. We just don't know that. And so while I would love to sit here and be able to tell you guys, oh, let's have faith in Patrick Williams, here's what I'm telling you. Modest Bucelis is on that team. And while I do think Bucelis will play the 3 initially, as he adds weight, he could be a long-term 4. Now, that doesn't necessarily eliminate Patrick Williams because Patrick Williams can maybe then move back to the 3. It is what it is. You have interchangeable forwards. That's where the NBA is going. Cool. But then you also have Julian Phillips, right? who started showing some things last year. Didn't really get a whole lot of minutes, even though he had 2 months of averaging over 13 minutes per game. Hopefully he's coming out here attacking it. He looked pretty good in summer league. The shot looks like it looks a little bit better. He's also somebody that's plays with a little bit more energy. He gets block shots, those type of things. He attacks closeouts as well. He also, I would say, rookie Julian Phillips was already more apt to take open shots than what third year Patrick Williams is. So that again, you got people behind you that are ready to take your spot if you slip again. And they're not the 6'4" guards. They're forwards. They're ready to take that spot. And so let's hope that this is a season where Patrick Williams, goes. And Lauri Markkanen was ranked as 5th. When you look at Lauri when he left the Chicago Bulls, if this type of list, I'd have to go back and look. I wouldn't be surprised if Lauri was ranked similarly around the area that Patrick Williams was. So it's not done yet. He's not a bust yet, but he got to start showing that he's ready to bring it. And we'll see if that's the case. With that said, we're going to get into the last topic of the day, and that is the reaction from Vooch talking about trade talk. We'll get into that next. All right, Bulls fans. So before we get out of here today, me and Pat on our last episode talked a little bit about the Nikola Vucevic interview that happened overseas at Goran Dragic's international retirement thing. And in that, we focused more on him talking about his retirement. But in one of the things that he said there in the quote there is that, when he talked about the team and where they were and how they were ranked number 1 in the East, and they could have finished anywhere between 4th and 6th. He talked about how the trade talk got to them. That the trade talk got to them as a team. And then this has led to some reaction from Bulls content creators, Bulls fans, is that, this is a losing mentality from Nikola Vucevic, that trade talks, trade rumors, whatever it is, that's just part of the game. And if you allow that to throw yourself off, it's not a good look. Now, here's what I'll say to that, is that I agree with that. But I don't think Nikola Vucevic was saying that him specifically, like, oh, the trade talk got me, it threw me off. I think he was saying as a team, it threw them off. And I think that people are taking that quote and attributing that to him talking about it just affected him. And I didn't take it that way personally when I read the interview. But here's the thing. I understand what it's rooted in. As an NBA player, unless you are clearly one of the top 5 players in the NBA, and I think even then sometimes, you're going to be in trade talks. You're going to be in trade rumors. Trade talks, trade rumors can be a little bit of a different thing. And so it is disappointing. It is disheartening to a degree to hear that one of the players that is part of your core, still is part of your core, but that was what this thing was built around, talked about and basically blamed trade rumors as why the Bulls disappointed. And I understand that. And I feel where everybody's coming from on that one. But here's the thing that I'll throw into this, even as a counterpoint. And this is just, again, I've said it before. Let me be clear. I understand the response to hearing a player say trade talks threw them off and they couldn't rebound from trade talks. I understand the vitriol that comes in that response. But as somebody who's already losing basketball games, as a team that's already losing basketball games, as somebody who's already missing one of you, the guy that Vooch in the same interview said was the piece that kept them together in Lonzo Ball, that he made it all work, and losing that. And then to hear the constant trade talks. Hell, I think we saw last year that the trade talks got to Zach LaVine, if you looked at some of his play on the court, right? When he was able to play. So it's happened. They're humans. It happens. I understand that we're not going to live in a world where trade talks just aren't ever going to bother a player. I understand that, right? I understand that. But with that said, is that you expect more out of your players. You expect more out of players that are getting paid to play a game. And the fact of the matter is, Vooch, you said it last year, media day. You said if we don't perform, this could be the last year that we're together. And that's what happened. So when you say that, and you're the one, and I always go to Vooch and I say this, Vooch is a player that is very open and very honest. I love candid Vooch because he's going to shoot it straight. He did it. He said it multiple times. You got to be aware and you got to think about what you're saying. And so when it comes down to Nikola Vucevic and the reaction from him blaming trade talk, yeah, it sucks. And yeah, it's not the mentality that you want. You want a player that's going to say, hey, we're going to go out here and prove it. We're going to play so good on the court that the trade talks aren't going to matter because you'd be crazy to trade me or trade anybody else because of how good we're going to execute. And Vooch, for the most part, like, I'm sorry, Vooch, you were traded once. You were traded multiple times, actually, but you were traded. And the fact is that While the 18 and 11 that you brought is a lot better than some people acting, your impact on the game is a lot better than some people give you credit for. Your defense has been disappointing. You yourself has talked about the fact that if you take your three-point shot away, you're still a beast in the paint, and you won't stay in the paint. So all those things, that's what comes with the nature of the game. That's what comes with being an NBA player. You're going to be in trade talks. And it's going to, hey, listen, if trade talks bothered you last year, they're definitely going to get to you this year because your name is going to be in a lot of trade rumors at the start of the season up until the trade deadline. That just is what it is. But you guys can let me know how you guys feel, as always, down below. Make sure you guys are following us at Locked On Bulls, guys. We appreciate you guys so much for tuning in and making Locked On Bulls part of your everyday schedule, man. And, throughout this, with the change with Pat leaving Locked On, and like I've told many people before, that's not the end of me and Pat working together. You're still going to see me and Pat's faces a lot together. Go and check out views from the bleachers. With Pat leaving and me hosting the show solo, I want to make you guys a bigger part of the podcast. One thing that we got away from with me and Pat doing the show is the mailbag. We're going to bring the mailbag back. That voicemail for here, we changed the number. It's 331-240-1180. Again, 331-240-1180. Make sure you guys stay locked in with us. I want to hear from you guys throughout this. We're going to make you guys a big part of the show through this and when we do live streams. But yeah, that's it for us for today. For myself, no more Pat the Designer, man. This has been Locked On Bulls. We're free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace, y'all.